Hello and welcome to the Annie Altman Show, the podcast, Season 5. Welcome to the 6th episode in the Compassion C series. Today I'm here with my friend Taylor. Taylor, thank you so much for being here virtually, LA to Hawaii. Ooh, a little mic crinkle. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, maybe it was just on my end. The mic did the queer thing.
Been queer.
Him queer, that microphone. Taylor is super fashionable and super creative and in all sorts of projects. I'm going to turn it over to you to share a little bit with the virtual world about what you want to share.
All right. Thank you. Hi, I'm Taylor. So in COVID, I've done quite a few creative projects. I didn't mention this one to you, but much like this equity shirt, I had some spoken word, but I have this spoken word piece called Keep Blooming, and I made a short film about it. And I'm really excited about that. Call myself a little flower boy, plant daddy, so I'm often, rearranging my plants and flowers and working on poetry and writing and all that good jazz. But you can see my poetry via Instagram or my website. It's all Tay Noir, Instagram or taynoir.com. If you're interested in reading or hearing me do some spoken word about some very important topics right now.
Yeah,
So
I would love to plug that shirt you're wearing. And I love your fieriness in talking about equity over equality and how different they are.
Absolutely, yeah. So this shirt, like I was saying, came from a spoken word piece that I did. And it actually happened around Pride. And it's when everyone was just saying, equality, equality. And then they were saying, look, we brought a Black person to our table, and look, we have a Black person over here doing this now. And I'm just like, that's not good enough. Thinking by allowing one or two of us to sit at your table is equality. It really diminishes individual needs. And so there's a brand that has this shirt that says equality really big. But that notion doesn't mean much to me because there you are in Hawaii, here I am in New York, and we have our own kind of oppressive systems that we have to navigate. But in doing that, we need completely different things. And if someone who wanted to support both of us was like, here, Annie, here, Taylor, here's the same thing for you to compete and be successful, one of us or probably both of us are gonna fall short because our needs aren't being met specifically and individually. And so, yeah, I just like the word equity. It just makes so much more sense, especially as an educator. I could never give a classroom of 30 students the same assignment. I had to differentiate because I had multiple learning levels in one class. So in order for them to be successful, I had to give them all individual needs. And that just makes more sense to me. And that's where this shirt comes from. Equality, period, nothing else.
Equity.
Give me what I need,
period.
Give them what they need. You have equity, period. Equity.
Also, do you say you were in New York
Yes.
or you're just saying like Hawaii to New York?
Oh,
Maybe
no, I said you were in Hawaii, I'm in LA. Did I say New York?
I thought you did.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in both a little. Also, with learning stuff, people accept love languages, or I stop because people accept those more now, I'll say. And I really see learning in a similar way of how people are going to learn, and also what sort of exercises and practices and trainings and whatever are going to help someone learn are going to be really different. That's cool that you recognize that rather than being like, here's the same thing for everyone to do, because that'll work.
Yes. Yeah, because people can hide. What I was finding was that people were hiding behind this word equality. and they didn't have to do intentional work. They didn't have to figure out the intersections of the spaces that they're creating and the people that are oppressed by those spaces that they're creating. And it was really frustrating to me. It's like, no, if you're gonna speak this, if you really wanna call yourself a champion to the people or a service to the people, you have to do the work. And it's not by just saying, all right, there you go. Yeah.
In talking about that with compassion, I feel like that can come up with like toxic positivity and the part of love and light that is, again, that sort of toxic positivity of, well, it's only love and light, and if only you were spiritual enough, then you would just be walking on a cloud in sunshine all day. Like,
that's cool that you brought that up. I don't think people talk about, you know, the toxic relationships that can exist with positive things or positive behaviors. Like there's always an extreme, and toxicity can exist in either of those extremes. So to hear you say, what was the word you used? Positive
toxic positivity is not my phrase.
Yes. I was like, well, I never heard that, but I'm hearing it and it makes so much sense. Like, I don't even have to ask questions. I feel like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
You're like, I've met that spiritual asshole before. I've met that bitch. I've met that whatever. Like, the podcast is getting a lot more equitable and real for how I talk. Hello.
Yeah. But like you said, equity, like you really can't present equity without having a compassionate lens. And I don't think someone who isn't compassionate could understand the concept of equity. And so it's very hand in hand. And so anyone who will be listening to this or watching this, I hope that that's an idea that they can take, that like, in order to be compassionate, I should probably think of this word, equity. And in order to be an equitable person, I should probably think of this word, compassion.
They
do.
They go hand in hand. Yeah.
All the seeds.
All of them. I appreciate you reading through all of them and seeing the connection. And with that connection of those two words, that's something I think about with the podcast of, am I just preaching to the choir, or these people who are already believing these things, and how is it talking about feelings and talking with so many people about their feelings and their experiences? How does that translate into the action of equity? Because equity is, and now I'm back on, well, love is a verb, and yeah, love is a noun, and all of these things. And also there are actions associated with being a human being. Like, again, I'm to the point of, meditation is great and necessary, and sitting still and being silent, and also so is doing things. So is distributing food to people.
Yes. Absolutely. I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were just talking about the project I did and how I was seeking support, and I was kind of having a hard time with the people that were supporting me. And it just came down to, like, as long as I am an able-bodied person, or even a spiritually able person, as long as I have enough life in me to do, I have to. Especially if I have something. Like, I don't think people with talents or skills, maybe skills, because you can just work towards that and get better at it, but talents, I don't think belong to any talent holder. It is like our God-giving, our world-giving, whatever you think your association to this space is, duty to give that back, to release that. And wow, I was like, that's the compassion in me, like, oh my God. But anything that I have, whether it's the spoken word or these ideas, my ability to grab a bag for someone and walk them to their car, my ability, you know, to give someone a compliment when I know it's just going to brighten their day because someone just said something very shitty to them. I have to get that out. I have to release that because God put it in me. And not for me. I can't go around hoarding all of this creativity and love and compassion for myself. Like, no. I have to release it. I have to share it. I have to give it. Because it's not mine in the first place, you know?
That's exactly the thought that kept circling in my head, was because it isn't even really yours. I could go really into the spiritual and philosophical woo-woo of what is the separation, what is mine and yours, and a definition of compassion from a friend, or that a friend taught me, is coming to mind that I feel like you would enjoy or know, which is that compassion is sitting with suffering. And so both your own and also sitting with someone else's. And so that part of compassion that requires the reflection, that outside thing to see and witness and recognize, like,
I would go one step.
go ahead.
No, sorry.
Back on equity
To
of
what
like
you said earlier. Say it again.
having different needs, like recognizing their suffering is also suffering like mine, and maybe their suffering has different needs than mine does.
But to your point a little bit ago, I think the added piece for me is what separates like sympathy from compassion, is what you said, is that doing piece, that doing component. So we can sit in the suffering, but unless I'm offering either my learned experience or my tangible giving of something that you might lack, to me, that's the way you lead in compassion. Once you sit through that suffering, there has to be a doing. There has to be that doing element. Yeah.
Well, like saying,
but
like,
but not.
I'm so sorry. Maybe it's still recording. We're back. Hello? Hi!
Yeah.
Thank you for being so sorry about the
Of course.
oh my gosh.
You're on the island. There's no telling what kind of.
He's lost in a wave out there.
I love that, like when it actually says, "You are the host of the meeting now." Like, this is your show now.
It is. It is. It's like I'm the captain now. Like I'm the host now. Welcome to the Taylor Show. Hello. Things just got a lot more fashionable here. Way more fashionable. So significantly much more fashionable.
Stop gassing me up.
I love your. It's, you know, we're still in Libra season. I'm gonna talk about fashion because it's accurate. That's the truth here of the thing. Okay, so we were talking about the like recognizing different people's needs and the sitting with suffering, and then you were talking about the action too, and the also doing something, and I was relating it about to what you'd been sharing of like, this thing has to come out of me, I have to, or like, if I can carry this thing for this person who can't carry it, I have to, like, what I'm hesitant to say compulsion because of that word and my history and all the labels with it, and also the compulsory action response, sort of a impulse, maybe impulse is a better word for there.
Okay. In what way? In what way are you thinking impulse?
Of like the other part of like, you can't just sit in the suffering and sit with the compassion all the time, is like, okay, well, now what? Like, what is the part that's not just reflecting, which I realize I'm saying on a podcast and reflecting about, what's the action? Which then is part of why conversations are so fun for me, because they're a little bit of both. Like, we are acting through reflecting. I have no idea. Like that one, yeah.
It's learning for some people, and especially even in the way that we talk, when we first met, there was this sense of comfort in exchange. And it was the best way for us to, whether it's how we learn people in general, but it was the best way for us to communicate. Like, oh, let's just really just talk this out. Let's go right to the point of it. Like, there's no need, there's no fluff. There's such comfort, that you can just get right to it. So yeah.
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and totally, it's that action of it with the base of security and comfort. And I'm like feeling uncomfortable in the comfort of it, and still learning compassion for that, and to sit with that of, okay, there's people who can feel flowy and easy to talk with, and you can lean into that or accept that that's part of your learning style, perhaps, or your way of what is part of your need for equity, or also part of maybe the equity that I can then provide for someone else who learns by listening, or who learns by seeing someone else. Oh, okay, well, I can start a podcast too. I can do this stuff also, like whatever it is for their learning.
And even just like showing compassion for yourself, like that was a learned thing. Like that was a actual thing that I had to learn based on my own traumas and my own upbringings. I had to actively learn how to be okay with the choices that I was making. Don't get it wrong, I'm very arrogant, so if I do something, it's because I want to do it, but sometimes I didn't feel good about it. Not because it was a bad thing, but because of the relationship that action would have with other people in other spaces. And it wasn't until I learned to love myself fully that I was able to have compassion for these spaces and things that I was doing that might not be the easiest thing or space for me to exist in. And I definitely learned that from my cousin. She's one of the most loving, spiritually sane human beings I'd ever met. And I would get so just tough on myself. Black men are often policed from the moment they're out of the womb, whether it's from our parents trying to protect us, our community, making sure we get out of the hood, or our own internal things. There's always this policing on our behavior. And undoing that was having compassion for who I knew I was as a Black man. And it was very intentional. And I had to learn that for myself, and it made it much easier for me to have compassion for everyone else. I'm always been an educator, and I'm a Cancer, so I'm always leading with my heart and my feelings. But my highest level of compassion, I feel, hasn't come until more recently, because I've been compassionate with myself. And it was hearing you say that relationship of knowing compassion for self that really brought that to my head. It's like, that's very important, compassion for self. And it's the best place to learn it. Because if you didn't grow up with it, or you didn't, you don't have your learning language of compassion, you don't know what that looks like. And so you start here, start internally is what I would suggest. I'm no Brene Brown, but I've done a little healing.
Equity for yourself and for all of your internal self parts, and the part of you that part of how you're an educator is you're educating yourself. Equity for all.
For you, because yes, my friend keeps saying, you're so complex. You have so many different levels or so many different spaces. I was like, we all are. I just feed all my spaces. I give them all energy and time. I'm not about to suppress this part of me. So no, they all gonna live in light and shine. We're all complex, but creating equity, yes, giving all of those spaces, all of those energies inside of you, all of those spirits, or whatever you want to call it, space to exist and thrive and grow. Yes, Annie.
I'm speaking from my own learning through repressing, and then that does not seem to, that doesn't feel good, and that has not been sustainable in terms of me existing as a human.
Yeah.
Pushing one of them down, it doesn't, I'm gonna say pass. I'm gonna say pass, because that's not equity then, right? If you're only feeding these parts of yourself that you believe ought to be fed. Oh, and now I'm seeing all the food equity things of like everyone deserves to eat all of the food parts, no disordered food things for people that, I mean, they're gonna be there. We talk about them and then we feed you.
Yeah.
If you know, you know. If you followed that one, you know it. And it is the classic starting with yourself, which is so cliche because it's, you know, the more, I feel like often the more like annoying a thing is, it's because there's more truth in it. It's like, yeah, because you got to start with you, because where else are you going to be offering compassion to others from if it isn't starting with you? If you're not being equitable to all of the different parts of you that need to express themselves, then where are you going to encourage someone else to do that? Like, who are you the most encouraged by? You're encouraged seeing someone do the thing. Oh, we're back on action. It's most encouraging, lead by example, to see someone doing it. We're getting barks of approval.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was leaving Chicago to move to LA. All of my teacher friends and creators was like, "Yo, why are you making this move?" And I was like, I'm feeling kind of stifled here in Chicago. And the biggest thing was that like I knew I needed to grow in my queer identity, but I didn't know how that existed in Chicago. But I would often tell my friends without telling them. Some I told explicitly, but I was just like, if I'm going to be an educator, like I feel that I'm half-assing these students because I'm only feeding them the parts that I feel confident about in myself. They're not getting the full Taylor that they think they're getting every day. I'm bamboozling these kids. I come to school and I show up and I give them myself and they're getting all of me. And I'm like, nope, you're just getting this part that I'm most confident in. I was like, no, if I'm going to give or service young people or anyone, I want to be my most authentic self. I want to be my most healed self because what I give will be at a much higher level. And a lot of people didn't understand that. But then they see who I am today and they're like, oh, you needed to do that. You needed to do that because I can feel what you're giving through the screen, from Chicago, from Minneapolis, or wherever my people are. They can feel how I vibrate even from a distance because I just had to be authentic and grow for myself. And if I knew that I was going to service or give anything to anyone else, period. Starts with self. Sounds cliche because it's the truth and they've been saying it since we've learned words. Like, that's why things are cliche. Because it's going to be the first and last thing we hear.
Ooh, born alone, die alone. That says a lot too about those relationships of how, you know, how the changes of that, see how compassion came up with people expressing to you how they felt about your decision versus, well, not even like the difference, I'm sure, of how the, you know, some friends who were like, no, you need to do this, versus friends being like, I hear you and I love you and here's my authentic reaction and okay, here's what we're doing, and how does it get navigated to that very satisfying feeling of validation externally, which, oh my gosh, we're not ever supposed to want, from someone to say, wow, I see you shining as your most Taylor self right now. And I'm really glad that you took that action to do what you needed to do for you, because you're the only one who can do it for you. No one else could have moved you.
I'm glad you had enough compassion for yourself to do what you needed to do for yourself. Like, because if we, like, it's like, we're on it. I mean, like, it could very well be without, you know, without compassion for self, it can turn into like this fear. Without loving yourself, all of these things that you know or that you feel are natural for yourself, it creates like a barrier between you and getting there. Um, so that compassion for self is very, very, very important. And I hadn't never even processed the like compassion the intentional compassion that I had to have for myself. Like in explaining it, I know that that's where my head was, but at that moment, I was still beating myself up. I still couldn't fathom that, like, oh my God, I'm about to be waking up in LA. That doesn't make sense to me. Something's gonna go wrong. Like, don't get too excited about it, because what, you think you're gonna be living in LA and like living in LA? Like, who do you think you are? But it took a lot of courage and compassion to drive my butt from Chicago to LA to sleep on someone's couch for 6 months, someone's leather couch in front of the window, in front of the LA sun for 6 months. It took courage and compassion. Look at me now. It's important.
And that's also on action while still having all of the feelings and all of the fear and all of the self-doubt, and ironically having the parts that are not compassionate, that are, who do you think you are, and well, why do you need to move to this place, or oh, you're on a leather couch and isn't that really hot in the morning, sucks to suck, like all of those things that are there, and still saying, this is where I want to be. This is where that inner whatever voice, whatever you want to call it, that little thing is being like, go do this. This is what you need to do for you. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because it is so not as pretty as it can sound, or like hear after the fact of, in my experience, a lot of times I really relate to that of like, no, I'm doing this compassionate action for myself because this internal dialogue is not compassionate, and that needs to change, and that needs to not be like this. So I need to do this thing, and there's that weird irony of it being almost harder to do, and also it being sort of the option of what's going to happen. And I feel like the more times it happens, or getting to reflect it to other people and talk about it, that nugget you said of, I'm glad that you had the self-compassion, the compassion for yourself to do what you needed to do, to say, hey, I need to move right now. There's something that's saying to go to this place, or to, you know, whatever came over you when you wrote the spoken word related to your shirt, and then whatever came over you to record it and share it. And, you know, like, what is that inner artist, creative, impulsy thing that I can't make any charts about, or any like nerdy words here, or it's the actual feeling and listening to it, and then taking action based on it, and being like, I am going to do something based on this thing I can't see or justify. Like, no one could tell you, like, here's how your life's going to work out if you move to LA and if you whatever. Like, it's on you to.
No, sorry.
I was going to say, it was just on you to do. Cut me off, please jump in.
No, just in my experience, it's always been better to do these things than not. Like, anything that is inside of me, I've never felt shitty about or felt bad about when I released it. or when I followed it. And in my head, like when those things come up for creatives or just growing, like I tell my mom, paying bills is not hard. At least for me, the hardest part about being an adult is not paying bills. It's about growing. Like that is hard. When you know better, you actively have to do better. When you're a kid, you can know better and still choose not to do better because I'm a kid. It's expected of me. But as an adult, like that's those growing pains. And when I hear you talk about like sometimes the inner conflict or like you actually doing the work to be compassionate for yourself and others, that's growing. Even when the inner monologue isn't on board with the action, that's because you're growing, you're healing, you're diminishing that inner monologue that isn't as in line and in tune with your spirit. And the more you do that, it won't even be an inner monologue. It would just, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm existing with compassion for self and others. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's nice to hear that you like your journey. And when I look at the conversations you're having with people and that you're wanting to have with people and these topics that you're trying to push, like it's the same, like you're getting it out of you and you're sharing it with the world in hopes that it helps them. That's your compassion, that's your courage, that's your creativity, that's your consciousness, that's your seeds. And it's beautiful. It's very beautiful to see, and I hope to see. But I hope that all of your viewers or friends really tap into that, because when I'm going over this, I'm like, yo, this was the conversation I was having with myself when I was at a very low during COVID. And I was like, oh, what are you actively going to do to get out of this? How are you going to actively feed those other parts of you that haven't been fed these past 5 months? You're creative, you're a people's person. You need to do these things. How are you creating change? Where's the courage to get out of these things? So I love that you're existing in these things, and I love that I can actually see it in our conversation. It's really cool.
So many more messages. Cute aggression. Ah, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. And getting to share it is that compulsory and compassionate feeding back to me, and thing that I needed in lowest of low points and at low moments still of, okay, well, you can be okay not knowing and having some framework, and also where are you integrating, where are you connecting, reflecting, and acting? How do you show that compassion to yourself? And sometimes it is a conversation or a doing the work on your own internal monologue, like you're saying. I would be so curious to hear more, and I'll share one that you'll appreciate, where there's an acupuncturist I've been seeing here to help with my Achilles, and she's so cool and such a badass, and she's a Cancer like you are, and she's given me, as kind of a homework instruction thing, some mantras and things to be saying every morning, especially in where I am now, where I'm getting to stay with really good friends' parents, with people who are our family. And so having all these things come up of all of those same spiraling lessons of, well, do you deserve this, or you whatever, meh, 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 like, why you, who do you think you are to be in a comfy bed here, having access to a toilet and nice people who care about you, rest, like all of those things that, of course, if you told me that, I'd be like, fuck yeah, dude, of course you're worthy of that, of course you deserve that. And so she's been really helping me have that conversation with myself, wake up in the morning and say, you deserve this, you are allowed to be here. And I'm like, wow, hold on, that's uncomfortable. Like that feels uncomfortable to say. You want me to keep saying it until I'm comfortable? And believe it or not, the more I say it and do the action, the more it does change and shift in some capacity. These things that can feel so goofy and so silly and so cliche, to be like, hey, go look in the mirror and say you love yourself to yourself. And I'm like, fuck you, fuck that, what? Okay. So I'd love to hear from you what some of those actions are to practice that compassionate self-talk and talking to yourself like you would talk to someone that you love.
Well, for myself, it typically is, it's just like the reflection process. Like I have the conversation or I sit in the suffering. And once I've done that, it's just like the next step is just natural. And so a lot of times it's a lot of like, wow, this makes sense. I've never really put words to it, but I know the more that I feed my gratitude, it makes me like glide on gratitude. So the more I'm doing, I'm I'm going and arranging flowers, and I'm watering my plants, and I'm praying to my ancestors, and I'm looking at my dad's portrait and I'm talking to him. The more I do that daily, it makes it so much easier for me to walk outside and extend that. And I think that's probably been the most like to do thing in my life as a part of practicing the compassion. Like I said, in some of these spaces I exist in, it can be kind of natural to be compassionate. Growing up with a very compassionate mother who was a single mother, but she was always bringing some homeless person into our house. And as a kid, I didn't understand why I was sharing my fruit snacks with this girl she just picked up off the street. But I've watched and witnessed compassion from an early age. So it's always been natural, but it was the learning of self-compassion that makes it easy. Like that's my kind of to-do thing, my point of action with compassion that makes it easy for me to share, if that answers your question. Does that make sense?
Mm.
I was like, that was long-winded and kind of in a circle. I hope you get like what I was trying to say, you know, the compassion I have with my action.
Yeah, this whole podcast is long-winded and in a circle. It's a circular practice of much like equity is a circle. It all is self-sustaining. It is
Yes.
all a circular. I love that gliding on gratitude too, and that kind of in the circle of like being able to extend it because you're practicing it with yourself. It's so yeah. That cliche is so real. Of it cut out for a second.
No, you were no.
Of people, of us talking to other people how we talk to ourselves. And so
Yeah.
like some of my deepest hippie beliefs are how much violence in the world comes from people being not having a lack of compassion for themselves, and so then they take all this aggression out on other people one-on-one, and then in bigger, and then it just becomes organized and systematic aggression because people are being assholes to themselves because no one ever told them they didn't have to be an asshole to themselves, or they just like kept replaying those same scripts.
No one told them to tell themselves that they deserve to be here. No one told them to tell themselves, I love me. No one told them to tell themselves that my existence is important. So all these things are questioned. And it's frustrating. Like as I saw it manifest with young people, and I was like, yo, you got to do the, and it was really hard to get a 16, 17-year-old to understand that they got to do the work. But I was constantly like, yo, you got to love yourself first, bro. Like, you got to be good to yourself first, because all you are doing, because A, you are a human going through hormones who are not equipped to deal with all of these life struggles, right? No one is, let alone a 16-year-old. So there's all this confusion inside of you, and society has never taught you that it was okay, or never taught you healthy ways to release that. And so what do you do with all of this angst and frustration and love? Because it's good feelings too, but if you don't know how to release it, it's all just this. Ooh, and it's like, all right, now I'm about to cuss somebody out. I'm about to fight somebody. I'm just about to emote a lot of negative energy because I don't know how to harness all of the energy that is inside me. Yeah. real.
Is that
It's
part of,
truly real.
yeah, I feel like, I'm curious, does part of being an educator to you feel like, because you can't teach someone how to love themselves. You can show them how you love yourself. But do you feel like part of it is like that teaching how to release? Kind of like you were saying of like how to let it out, how to, I'm very much
Yes.
like, this is art and art therapy and why we make things is to, like, even football,
Yes.
like, go tackle something, go like be full of testosterone, like, go do it there in this structured,
But
boundary, comfortable place.
yes, that's the tool. That at least that's what they say, right? That's what it's like. Oh, let's give this school a bunch of resources to help these kids who have all of this angst and anxiety and frustration and all of this. So we had a lot of, we had a punching bag and we take them to the peace room and we let them hit the punching bag. But that was just 10 minutes. Like that 10 minutes doesn't really do the healing of 16 years of a traumatic upbringing. And so, like I would tell them, like, yo, this is momentarily. I promise you, we only doing this so you can get back in class. But the only way this is gonna be sufficient is like if you learn how to do this for yourself. And that's why I was never like when I became a disciplinarian, I didn't make a big deal out of my kids self-medicating before they came to school. Like, they just don't have the language and resources to say, oh, I'm fighting this anxiety with this indica joint that I smoke right now. But the way we're projecting is, oh, look at all these poor kids on drugs, so, doing drugs. But then you come out here, there's a whole industry of people, this cannabis that is healing. That's all my kids were doing before they got to school and went through a metal detector so they could walk into class. Was mentally and physically preparing for 7 hours of just more angst, you know? Yeah, and it was my job to kind of like, oh, you smell like weed. You need to go home. Someone needs to come bring you a new sweater. Let me pat you down. I'm like, boy, I'm just glad you came to school today. Keep your eyes open. Stay alert. Don't get caught. All right. Don't get sent to my office. Do what you got to do to be present. Or that was their release. That was the only release they knew. And it would have been nice if people were having conversations with them about the intentionality behind self-medicating, and giving them language and autonomy with that healing, or that alleviating stress or alleviating anxiety, as opposed to just being a stoner kid before they came to school. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna write some cannabis curriculum to integrate into the social emotional learning aspect of educating.
It's part of the equity. It is part of the, I'm glad for that perspective of your own compassion with yourself to say that human is doing the best that they can to show up and to be here. And I'm really glad that they're here. Period. That's it. Thanks for being here at school today, human. I'm really glad you showed up, because that's the only action that you got, really, is to be there.
Right.
And like not
When I
making
know
this like you're that what?
I said, when I know they didn't want to be there, like they're actively trying to make the better choices, especially if they didn't have to be, especially if they were a young person who didn't have an adult kind of monitoring their doings. They didn't have to come to school. So when they did, it was something they felt in themselves. They literally was like, oh, I can go over there and smoke with my homies. I can go over there and hang out with my friend, or I can take my butt to school. And they was like, oh, let me go to school. Yes! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because that was their aspect of growing and trying to do the right thing. And I knew that.
Their own self-disciplinarian, rather than like you having to come in with all of those. To me, those are outdated cliches that I don't feel like even are cliches in the same way anymore, of like, I'm gonna pat you down and you smell like weed, and like,
Come on.
come on. Well, and also that one of all of, like, there's kids that are younger than 16 coming to school on stimulants because we've accepted societally that that's helping them focus. If, again, to
We're
equity,
giving
what if that,
12 of coke, but you want me to send this kid home from something that God created with her coochie? No, thank you.
never heard that one. Weed from a gift from God's coochie. Well, and it's equity again to your shirt.
Say that again.
It's equity to your shirt again of like, not only, yeah, it's a fucking plant that was not made in a lab, that was grown. So can we first like start there at point zero? Next, to say that different bodies are going to have different things that they need. So if this body is needing this thing to be here today, then they're here.
That. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, well, and definitely in my own, like, so I took an antidepressant for 10 years, and towards the end of that started smoking and becoming a self-proclaimed stoner, and I've gone through different waves of how much and what amount and what time of day or times or edibles or not edibles or whatever little things of it. And so getting to talk about and talk to other people about it is part of my own compassion with my own journey with it, to say I also don't know what I'm doing, and I also am using this as medicine. And so part of that is learning more about how it's medicine and how it can be medicine for other people. And to bring up Brene Brown again, taking it out of the shadow and this stigma of we're not supposed to talk about it, or, oh, I can't talk about it as an educator if I was supposed to tell people not to do it, of, hey, I'm a human, I also have shit to deal with, and here's the tools that work for me. So like maybe some of these tools work for you too. I don't know your body.
Period. That was my favorite. That was kind of my, like, when, let's say, whenever you just have to a release form, because you're disclosing some information or you're getting surgery and something might go bad, there's a release form. And so as an educator, like, we're told that we're mandated reporters. And oftentimes when kids trust adults, they really take their word to heed and very literal. And so my kind of release form would always be, now this is just what works for me. I'm not telling you to go do this because this might have a different effect on you. But I am telling you from my learned experience, this is what works for Taylor. Now you take whatever you want from that, but Taylor is not saying go do this. Because all it takes is for a kid to, like, Taylor said, I just need to follow my ambition. I felt like stealing the car, so I followed my ambition. And now I'm the reason this kid stole the car and I'm in the hot seat. Yeah. Take what works for you.
I feel like there's a whole shift in how education is going too, and like seeing our generation become the majority of educators, and seeing that shift happen is a lot of that same sort of, to me, it's a lot of blending of science and spirituality, and saying your learned experience is worthy and valid and relevant, and also so are the statistics on most people's, and those are both true.
Yes. I do think there's like a shift in how teachers are educating, but I do think there is like this decline of teachers happening. I think educators are at a point where most people in this nation are at a point is like, do I do what I love or do I do what makes sense? Because what I love does not make sense. I'm literally setting myself up to give other kids more of me than I give my own family. I'm literally setting myself up to be underpaid and overworked. And I think although our generation is very like, you know, education is our civil rights movement. I hate that quote, but we've heard it a lot. I think we're also recognizing, because we are a generation of healing now, especially women. I don't think they're falling for the okie doke. I think sanity is so important for our generation right now that people and educators are going to choose to educate in different ways or just not educate at all, because of self. Self is important. Healing is important. And when we know what we need to heal and be strong, and then we see a job or something, our passion, and we see how it literally becomes hurdles in us learning and growing and being who we want to be, it's like, I think I'm gonna go over here.
Ooh, that makes me think of a couple things, because there's the part of educating that is healing, and teaching that is teaching someone how to teach themselves, healing that is showing someone how to heal themselves, and that overlap. And then the other part, and this is like so my internal part that gets so loud about distribution of basic resources, educators and physically mentally disabled people, I feel, are still so overlooked and not talked about as these groups that we're all acknowledging with our words and not with our actions. And it's this same conversation, also cliche, that is still, oh, we know teachers are underpaid. And to me, the no shit, that's not going to change until we actually pay teachers what they need to be paid. Of course, people aren't going to want to do that until we change the very structural, literal, okay, what is the base pay for teachers? How are we viewing teachers societally as, like, can you imagine if we were like, damn, educating, that's one of those like really high paying competitive jobs, and here in capitalism, we tie a lot of value to that, whatever, like, which then I need to go on another rant of education being outside of this system of capitalism can be cool and fine in a lot of places, and putting it in education then of course is going to create this where it's like, oh well, because this isn't actually supported by these structures, then no shit, no one wants to do it, like. And it's so like, I would love, like, part of what my, in addition to spreading food, would be spreading money specifically to educators, and to change that whole, like, to people like you who are doing their own education and who really do want and enjoy educating and sharing, and would do it if they were actually supported to do it. Like,
If it
it's a
didn't
really,
my livelihood.
which is a smart decision. Like, that is the educated choice, to not be an educator right now, because then you can't fucking feed yourself. Like, I wouldn't want that person educating someone because they're not taking care of
They're
them.
not They're not whole. How I do not want to send my kid to spend 6 hours with 20 adults who have no desire to interact with them, because they don't have energy, because they have a headache, because they're playing this political game. I don't want to send, no. That my kid is receiving all of that. My young person is receiving all of that. They'd be better off in here, in my crib. we gonna do this all in house. Yeah,
And we're going to
but
collectively change how education happens. It will
yes.
collectively keep changing. Like,
And
have it.
as long as, if people take anything from our conversation about compassion, is that you can't have it without that doing. And so in hearing people, and here, like to your point where people are saying, oh yeah, teachers are underpaid and teachers are underpaid, like that's not the compassion I need. I don't need you to acknowledge the scrutiny that you put me under. I need you to go one step further and do the thing, the action. And then that makes your words compassionate. Otherwise, you're just stroking your ego by being a nice guy. Like, what does that do for me? Nothing. You gotta have that action piece to
Totally.
compassion.
And I feel like
And sometimes
with equity, I feel like it can be so, because so much of equity can be really tied to structures. I feel like that's that's where in my feelings it can get overwhelming of, on the one hand, it is so easy, and like I like in starting funds distribution company on Instagram as a way of showing how, you know, how you share funds, you Venmo it, you PayPal it, like it really is that fast. And on the other hand, to structurally change base teacher pay and how much schools get to fund for arts and all of these things, it feels, I guess, because those structures have been there for my whole seeing them, it feels more complicated of, okay, well, how do we do this? What is the compassionate action? Where do we even start here with paying people more? Not doing anything doesn't do anything. Like, got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of telling my friend this yesterday when I was on like my relation about people's choice to vote or not. I got about this much literature, fancy, thick, gloss, cardstock literature. So if they sent that cardstock to 1 million people, I've spent a great deal at Kinko's, FedEx, as an educator printing things. I got a good base idea of what it costs to print something. Cardstock, glossy, multiple colors, you know. Okay, you're a big corporation, you might have got it done at the cents per sheet, but I'm gonna say $1 per piece of literature. You printed off 1 million of those. $1 million to further your legacy as opposed to $1 million to do something that your legacy says it stands on. That makes no sense to me. You want us to vote for you so you can do these things on this literature, but here you are showing me that that's not a priority because I'm witnessing, I'm partaking in you spend $1 million on something you ain't never spent a part of your to-do list, your actions, you know? And that was just, it was very frustrating as I was getting all of this literature, but then, you know, we all can do something. You know, there's always a point, an entry point of doing something. Always.
Ooh, like there's always something to be grateful for. Like there is always some actionable step. Or maybe the action is go take a nap and then do the next action.
Because, yeah, like to think about, and I say that to say that like all of these problems that are perpetuated in America, we have the resources to fix it. And it's not a matter about how, it's just a matter about do we prioritize it enough? There's nothing in this nation preventing us from restarting the education kind of ideology and structure and system, but it would be so detrimental to people who exist in this elite society that it's like, let's protect and secure our comfort at the expense of our nation, at the expense of millions of people. Yeah, as easy as it is to Zelle some shit, it's that easy to to just turn some shit over. Because if they were leading with compassion, there wouldn't be this other side of the aisle. You know, some things are black and white. You know, some things are as easy as 1 + 1 is 2. You know. Yeah.
What would be your dreamiest dream of compassion in equitable education as an educator? And you've shared a lot of it already on the podcast of letting people take care of themselves how they need to, giving different resources to different students. Are there any other things or like reiterations you want to share of it?
I think the more equitable thing with education is like an equitable concept. And because of policy, when they think equity, they think physical funds and money and dollar per pupil, as opposed to what do these pupils in this demographic need. And I think if the ideology and the mind shifted to a more equitable kind of service-oriented lens, then it would just trickle down into our behavior. it will trickle down into young people getting what they need, because at no point are the decisions being made about our legacy. It's solely about the needs of the demographic of people that we're serving. And so in my mind, an ideal world is like the Department of Education understands this, and all that money they put into securing certain learning standards, they put that money into pushing this ideology on the educators, and so that it's a trickle-down effect.
The real trickle-down effect.
A real trickle-down effect, or more betterly, it's this fluid effect, and it's coming from both the top and the bottom. And you're just constantly getting what you need. And it's coming from the bottom because the young people see it, and they're going into this space with like ownership of their education because they see that it's theirs. Yeah.
And having the focus really be on the need rather than the, like you're saying, like dollar per pupil and that businessy mindset, which like cool, that can be useful to buy supplies. We're dealing with humans.
And it's just like, science is real. Data is real. We have professionals that will tell the Department of Education, the Secretary of Education, what young people need. And they will say, oh, those needs are not beneficial for us, so scratch it. We understand that the way that the school system is ran, 45-minute Gale, 45, that structure, that is not, we understand that there's multiple learning styles. And in order for all these young people to be successful, they need an equitable learning experience. An experience that is catered to them, even if they're in a building with people who aren't learning like them. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up.
I can go on this one.
Because you're one of the people who needs to be going on this one and talking to other people who also have more of the similar experiences that you have, and educating in different places. I love that you brought that up of, you know, who the people are who can really help structure our education systems the most, the educators, the people who are doing it, who are there and who have done it. And yeah. I, with the podcast, my intention more is to then, how can I help connect you to other people to have those conversations with, or to make those structures together, and to do that, to put that perspective out for someone else to start that conversation.
Community, like
connect it all.
Honestly, Annie, your concept of humanity and what it's needed, and I know I said this earlier, but I say it so people can really understand that, like, there was some work done behind your intention behind this, and I can just tell from our conversation and going through it, and so every time we talk about something, the other seed comes up. And so it just lets me know that you were at a very intentional place of understanding and processing on how you can best deliver or shape our understanding of humanity. And these concepts, these seeds that you've come up with are so intersectional and they're so on point. And so you use in your podcast to say how, you know, how can I extend you and put you in a place to further this conversation, to have this courageous conversation about equity, about education through community. You really, I see your vision and I see you living through it, and it's great.
Taylor, thank you again for the ego stroking and for seeing it. That's definitely the eye of an educator, to be like, hold on, there was some education and some depression and things that went into this thing here of my own structure and security, to say there is no security. And also, how can I let myself be my wordy self part, and also my very analytical, here's a list of 11 words that start with C part. And where does that help with my action reflection? And I'm really glad to hear that it is beneficial to you and that you can see some of that, because I'm definitely like, well, hold on, am I allowed to do things that feel good to me, that I want to do, that I feel like I need to do? Like, you're just having a conversation with someone, Annie, and then like doing like this on your computer to post it places. And okay, what would you tell a friend if they were doing what they wanted to do?
Exactly. have that compassion for yourself because you deserve it.
No,
That's
you
your mantra,
do.
right?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. It's the discomfort of feeling comfortable is pretty cool. It's really cool. It's really cool.
It's the best discomfort, I tell you. If I'm gonna be uncomfortable, it better be for me. It better be for my growth and my sanity. Look, sorry, that's my arrogance happening.
I don't see that as arrogance. I see that as actual equity. Because how else are you going to extend that to someone else if you're not practicing that for you?
In a space of discomfort if I can't with my own self, if I can't acknowledge how yeah.
I want to learn comfort from the person who's comfortable with themselves.
Yeah, it's worth it. And I'm sure you're learning that through your experience, the self gratification of just releasing, even before you see the tangible impact. The just releasing it, is a beautiful thing. And I always say, I don't, as much as I want others to be impacted by some of the things I create, oftentimes I'm creating because I need to create. And just the type of person that I am, is 9 times out of 10, I'm subconsciously creating for others. But once I get it done, that's a big step for me, to just get it done, to get it out. And I can worry about the world having access to it. But as long as I get it out, it's gonna be out there.
And it can be both. And once it's out, and it's not yours anymore. And maybe it never was.
Right? No, because it never really is, especially if it's something that was given from a higher place. Look, I'm just the vessel to release it. I'm just the vessel. Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to have fun with it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Taylor. I'm going to put your Instagram in the description so people can find you. And I'm already excited to have you on the podcast again. I don't know which sea we'll end up talking about.
This is good. This is really good. The sun is coming up and beaming through my window. But I am really happy to have caught up with you. I'm really happy to continue this conversation with others. And this idea that you shared with me, I really appreciate it. It's been great.
I really appreciate you sharing your ideas and your compassion and all of it. I have a lot of warm fuzzies for you, dude. I really appreciate this.
Okay, we can share them when we log off.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks for being you.
All right, thank you. You have a great day.